Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Shadow speaking. The year is 1980. The world trembles at the onset of a new conflict where the F-14 Tomcat will become a symbol of indomitable will and courage. Fasten your seatbelts as we are about to transport onto the decks of fighter jets, where every decision weighs more than a lifetime. The outbreak of the bloody war between Iran and Iraq took the international community by surprise with its scale and brutality. Iranian armed forces strengthened the defense of strategic borders, utilizing the latest technological advances and impressive mobilization. F-14 Tomcat pilots trained in combat conditions, which quickly elevated their skills to a level unprecedented in the region. The outbreak of the conflict marked a turning point, the scale of which was difficult to predict in expert analysis. The impatience of Western governments grew as they observed an uneven arms race and the emergence of new threats. Iran, despite limited resources and restricted access to spare parts, endeavored to effectively maintain its fleet of Tomcats in readiness. The escalating tension in the region found an outlet in daily skirmishes, where each side tried to seize the initiative. Iraqi air formations used aggressive tactics and anti-aircraft artillery support, preventing Iranians from operating freely. Aerial duels carried not only the risk of shootdowns, but also the strain that exhausted both the aircraft and pilots. In the face of escalating conflicts, the Iranians made the F-14 the main pillar of their air defense, appreciating its advanced radar and long-range tracking capabilities of enemy aircraft. Tomcat fighters could detect opposing planes before they approached Iran's borders, putting Iraq in a difficult operational situation. However, not all actions ended in success, and unpredictable combat conditions carried many dangers. Before we delve into the details of the most dramatic skirmishes, it's important to recognize the scale of effort by engineers and technicians who maintained equipment efficiency. Frequent repairs, the lack of certain key components, and limited fuel resources affected daily life on the base. This world was filled with constant risk and pressure from command, demanding ever bolder operations. The intensity of the battles reached a new level when the initial skirmishes evolved into an unending cycle of raids and counterattacks. Iranian pilots recalled risky dogfights that often took place under minimal visibility and heavy ground fire. The statistics of lost aircraft began to concern commanders, while at the same time, the awareness of danger added determination to the soldiers. Over the mountains and deserts, the combat formations of both sides clashed in the vortex of successive missions, trying to take control of key zones. The Iraqi command invested in new aircraft. However, the lack of experience among many pilots prevented the full utilization of the machine's potential. Meanwhile, Iran had to contend with the progressing wear and tear of equipment, which was operating at the limits of its endurance. Operational actions required the synchronization of many elements, ranging from satellite reconnaissance to the coordination of ground support. Although the Iranians gained some advantage, thanks to the effective radars of the Tomcats, Iraq responded with anti-aircraft launcher fire and the introduction of new tactics. Increasingly, situations arose where both sides inflicted significant losses on each other. The fiercest battles took place over the Persian Gulf, where the stakes were not only prestige, but also free access to valuable maritime routes. Conducting operations in extreme temperatures posed an additional challenge, as the cooling systems for engines and avionics were constantly at risk of overloading. In such conditions, even the smallest malfunction could lead to catastrophic consequences. As the conflict escalated, so too did the anxiety of civilians, who watched squadrons of fighter jets fly over their cities. Each raid represented a risk to the population, but it also fueled a sense of national unity among Iranians. Despite fatigue and pressure, the morale of the pilots remained high and was one of the key factors determining the outcomes of these clashes. The Iranian ace of the skies, known for his courage and excellent mastery of the F-14, recalled moments of extreme tension. In one encounter, he had to fight alone against a superior number of Iraqi fighters, a challenge bordering on madness. The powerful electronics of the Tomcat assisted him in locating enemies, but it was his skills and cool-headedness that were crucial. Every maneuver had to be well planned, as any misstep would make the pilot an easy target for multiple simultaneous attacks. Warning signals about being targeted rang out incessantly, indicating further attempts to shoot him down. In this hellish chaos, Swift reaction and the cooperation between the radar operator and the pilot were paramount. The desert backdrop stretched beneath the fighter's wings, and the high temperatures further complicated operations. Much depended on the technical condition and reliability of the avionics, which had to withstand not only the GI forces, but also sand particles and sudden pressure changes. The Tomcats proved to be exceptionally resilient, although some failures could sideline the aircraft for long weeks. Operational reports were filled with dramatic descriptions of clashes where pilots emerged from situations deemed hopeless. Some carried within them fear and guilt after losing comrades, yet they also emphasized the brotherhood of arms and the solidarity of the squadrons. The war seemed to invade the private lives of every crew member, stripping them of a sense of normality. Many pilots admitted that the most terrifying moment was when the reading of a friendly machine suddenly disappeared from the indicators. In those seconds, a feeling of helplessness dominated, and commanders had to make split-second decisions. However, an operation was approaching that would test the entire Iranian Air Force and change the course of aerial rivalry. Planning the next phase of the conflict focused on mass raids and the need to break through Iraq's best protected defense points. Commanders decided to take the risk of sending F-14s right into enemy zones, counting on the element of surprise and the advantage of radar technology. Every pilot knew that just one mistake could end the mission tragically. Preparations for the operation lasted several days, with engineers checking every detail in the weaponry and navigation systems. Experienced mechanics mentioned that even a minimal lapse in maintenance could thwart the entire tactical effort. At the same time, Iranian soldiers analyzed the latest intelligence reports, trying to assess where Iraq had placed its most advanced launchers. Finally, the moment to raise the combat alert came, and pilots hastily took their places in the cockpits, focusing on crucial startup procedures. The tension felt during taxiing on the runway made every second seem longer than usual. The engines of the Tomcats roared at maximum thrust, trembling in accompaniment to the radio silence. After takeoff, the F-14 squadron headed south, aiming for one of the most important Iraqi air bases, vigilantly guarded against retaliatory attack. High above the clouds, radar operators strained their eyes and ears, searching for signals from enemy machines. At one point, several indicators began to warn of the detection of enemy units, signaling the inevitable start of the confrontation. A fierce battle erupted, where missiles interwoven with a series of evasive maneuvers and dense anti-aircraft fire. Each pilot had to show maximum precision, especially when jamming signals made it difficult to identify incoming targets. At a certain moment, one of the F-14s was hit by a projectile fragment, forcing it to make an emergency retreat. The operation proved successful by partially destroying key Iraqi radar installations, which provided some respite to the Iranians for a while. However, the downing of one aircraft and the damage to several others cast a shadow over the mood at the base. Commanders conceded that every victory in this conflict had a bitter taste of losses and triggered new moral challenges. Pilots returning from the combat zone reported the mission's progress with exceptional detail, emphasizing the immense importance of cooperation in the air. Decisions made in fractions of a second could save the lives of other squadron members, and the difficulty of each maneuver was explained by the harsh terrain and the saturation of the zone with anti-aircraft fire. Many experienced soldiers claimed that in this conflict, not only armies, but also human characters clashed. Speculations about an imminent end to the conflict began to surface on the front, yet neither side showed sufficient willingness for peace talks. Political conditions further complicated the exchange of diplomatic notes, and the situation turned into a game of nerves and brutal retaliatory actions. Meanwhile, Iranian F-14s stood guard, ready for the next missions. The importance of support from allies grew, though tense political relations and global interests meant that help came in a limited scope. Iran struggled to continue repairs and modernizations of its machines independently, which was almost an impossible task. In this time of uncertainty, pilots continued to train new squadron members, trying to pass on the knowledge gained in the heat of battle. News of another, even riskier operation than the previous one was already circulating at the airbase. The level of stress and fatigue reached its zenith, yet determination remained unwavering. Everyone understood that the coming days could be decisive for the fate of a years-long aerial rivalry. The new mission entailed a precise strike on one of the most heavily guarded refinery complexes, crucial to the Iraqi war economy. The exact plan of operation was developed based on satellite images and intelligence analyses, which were used to determine the optimal flight route. A team of experienced Tomcat pilots took on the task of breaking through enemy lines, thereby causing confusion in the anti-aircraft defense. An approaching sandstorm was a favorable factor for Iran, as it could hinder accurate targeting of the aircraft by Iraqi launchers. However, there was a risk that the atmospheric conditions could jeopardize the mission itself, worsening visibility and disorienting even the most advanced computer systems. The commanders assessed that this risk balance could lead to a breakthrough in the conflict. The F-14s took off just before dusk, counting on the element of surprise, as well as on a lesser intensity of actions in Iranian airspace. The formations flew in radio silence, focusing on onboard instruments and short-range signals. Tension prevailed in the cockpits, further intensified by the awareness of the mission's difficulties and the potential consequences in case of failure. During the flight, the crew spotted several groups of enemy machines on the radar screens, circling near the target zone. It was uncertain if Iraq was aware of Iran's plans, but it appeared that those forces formed a protective barrier around strategic facilities. The formation commander decided to split the group of Tomcats to confuse the enemy and attack from two sides. As the fighters reached the refinery region, powerful spotlights and missile launches greeted them with fire that illuminated the night sky. The pilots had to maneuver in extremely difficult conditions, avoiding not only ground-to-air defense, but also violent air turbulence caused by the sandstorm. One of the Tomcats experienced a hydraulic system failure, forcing the crew to rapidly evacuate the combat area. The rest of the formation continued the mission, dropping precision bombs on the main industrial installations. Although they did not completely eliminate the infrastructure, Iran achieved a propaganda and tactical effect. Iraq had to redirect additional forces to this sector, which relieved other Iranian operational groups. The echoes of this action spread widely, causing unrest both in Baghdad and in the capitals of Western countries. Both sides of the conflict became aware that the war was entering an even more dangerous phase, where innovation and determination triumphed over numbers. Meanwhile, despite the mission's success, Iranian pilots had to deal with the loss of one of their comrades. At the airbase, emotions ranged from triumph to sorrow and disillusionment. Mechanics set to work repairing damaged machines, knowing that each passing hour breathed life into Iraq's forces and diminished the sense of victory. In the corridors of bunkers, there were whispers of possible counterattacks that could change the current balance of power. Hopes for a swift end to the war dwindled again, as both Iran and Iraq were capable of straining their remaining potential in the name of short-term territorial gains. Emboldened by successes, the leadership planned further operations, each time crossing the bounds of reason. Pilots, hardened by stress, increasingly questioned the sense of this prolonged slaughter. This story was slowly approaching a point where neither side could declare a clear victory. Images of destroyed aircraft and the inhumane conditions under which this war was fought would remain in the memories of witnesses forever. The fates of those who survived the aerial clashes were a testament to the high price humans could pay for ambition and political gains. In the following months of the conflict, Iran and Iraq continued to exchange blows, resorting to increasingly desperate measures. Negotiations with third-party countries to supply equipment and ammunition were ongoing, but the terms of these agreements were often unfavorable or ambiguous. Hope for a definitive resolution, mixed with fear of an escalation in the war's scale. The use of chemical weapons and attacks on civilian targets became subjects of condemnation by the global public opinion. Though this did not lead to an immediate end to the conflict, Iraq attempted to block key Iranian supply routes, and Iran responded with long-range raids deep into enemy territory. In this cycle of violence, the F-14 pilots remained a symbol of Iranian resilience. Assisting bombers and protecting transport convoys became everyday tasks for the Tomcats, who operated under constant stress and time pressure. Many squadrons were extremely exhausted, and the possibilities for rotating personnel and equipment were diminishing. Nevertheless, new groups of recruits joined the ranks of the Air Force, filling the gaps left by the fallen and missing. Reports from commanders increasingly contained conclusions about the unpredictable outcome of this war. The economies of both countries suffered massive losses, and societies struggled with a growing lack of basic products. Spreading propaganda tried to maintain support for the war efforts, but the fatigue of the nation was becoming evident. Despite exhausting battles and numerous failures in maintenance work, the F-14s still fulfilled their role, forming the backbone of Iranian air defense. Their presence was significant enough that Iraq never achieved full dominance in the air. The conflict seemed endless, and both sides remained in fierce engagement, consuming more resources and human lives. At the end of the war, which had lasted 8 long years, the world learned how dangerous and devastating unbridled competition for power and influence could be. Both Iran and Iraq suffered losses that exceeded even the boldest analysts' predictions. Some regions still bore the marks of bombings, and the trauma of the residents required long-term rebuilding. Pilots who survived this war admitted that no training could prepare a person for such a devastating conflict. The pervasive fear, sometimes suppressed by combat routine, permeated every aspect of their lives. Many of them gained legendary status, but the awareness of how many people paid the ultimate price took the joy out of these titles. When the ceasefire was signed, both sides remained on alert, knowing that any false move could trigger another tragedy. The Western world officially welcomed the end of the war, but the real effects of this rivalry were irreversible. The ruined infrastructure and divided societies would continue to feel the consequences of this conflict for a long time. The F-14 Tomcat serving Iran became a symbol of persistence and unexpected effectiveness in fighting against overwhelming forces. Although many machines were destroyed or needed serious repairs, these fighters went down in history as one of the key factors that prevented Iraq from dominating the airspace. It is important to remember that behind every film frame or photograph of a fighter jet are people and their stories, often tragic and filled with pain. The air gladiators were not only a tool of war, but also a testament to how much a person is willing to sacrifice in the name of defending their homeland. Our journey comes to an end and shows the immensity of sacrifice in aerial rivalry. The F-14 Tomcat and the courage of the pilots remind us that in the face of danger, humans can exceed their limits. Please leave a subscription and a like to not miss the next story, and share a brief comment.